Jungkook's solo album, Delay, stuns fans. What hidden lyric triggered internal chaos and silenced entire rooms? "I'm not singing that line. Not with him in the room." Jungkook's voice shattered the silence like broken glass as every head in Hype's executive studio turned toward him. His jaw was clenched, fists tight at his sides, black hoodie soaked at the collar from hours in the recording booth. The track that had just played, track 07, titled Dead End Nights, hung heavy in the room. Not because of the production, not because of the beat, but because of one line in the second verse. He had recorded it 4 times already, and each time he had paused, not just because of how it sounded, but because of what it said. Across the table, the lead producer, a man Jungkook used to trust, remained frozen, eyes darting to the A&R manager, to the lyricist, then finally to the man sitting silently in the corner, Taehyung. The ghost Jungkook had been trying to avoid ever since the entire solo project started taking shape. "You said you wanted to keep this album honest," the lyricist said carefully, flipping through a notepad. "That line is honest." "No, that line is petty," Jungkook replied, his voice low, controlled but visibly trembling. "It's dangerous, and it's not what I wrote. But you signed off on the co-writer version a month ago. The final pass had your approval." Jungkook stared at him for a long, stony second before responding. "Yeah, and did I know Taehyung was in the room when that line would be played worldwide?" Taehyung didn't flinch, didn't speak, didn't blink, and that silence made it worse. Because Jungkook knew he'd read it. He knew Taehyung had heard the line in the demo last week, hadn't said a word, hadn't pushed back, hadn't warned him that the entire album's emotional core, his core, would be twisted into a public weapon. Now the room was thick with tension. A journalist embedded in the rollout team had just tweeted 2 hours ago, "Hearing whispers, Jungkook's album is facing last-minute delays over a disputed line in one of the tracks. Something about betrayal. It's ugly. Stay tuned." Jungkook knew that tweet because he'd leaked it himself. Back in his dressing room, the soundproof walls weren't enough to keep the noise of rumors from vibrating against his skull. His phone was lighting up with messages from ARMY fans worldwide, confused, anxious, begging for answers. He didn't answer any of them, not even the one from Jimin that just read, "What the hell is going on? They're saying you name-dropped Tae." He hadn't. Not directly. But when the second verse of Dead End Nights said, "You sang with my shadow, divided by then sold my silence for screams," it didn't take a genius or a fandom with digital forensic skills to figure out who he was talking about. Jungkook ripped the in-ear monitors from his neck and slammed them on the couch. His breath was ragged, his reflection in the mirror clouded by sweat and doubt. He hadn't slept, not since he realized what that line truly meant, not just lyrically, but professionally. The label wanted controversy. He wanted catharsis. But not like this. And not with him in the same release week. He paced. He stopped. He opened his phone again and hovered over the voice memo app. There was a draft message saved, a voice note he hadn't sent, recorded at 3 a.m. after the listening party that Taehyung didn't attend. He pressed play. "Hyung, I know that line went too far, but you went further when you said nothing at all." He deleted it. Meanwhile, Taehyung sat alone in the executive lounge, untouched latte in front of him, scrolling through article after article speculating on what happened. His expression didn't change, but his hand gripped the armrest tighter every time he saw his name linked to betrayal, hidden feud, lyrical revenge. He remembered writing that line. He remembered why he didn't tell Jungkook. Because he thought maybe, just maybe, it would open the door to a conversation they never had after the London incident. He was wrong. Now that door had become a wall. And the release date? Frozen. Pending. Because of one line. Jungkook stood before the recording mic again. Alone this time. Everyone had cleared the studio for the night. Just him, the beat, and the truth. He stared at the lyrics printed in front of him, his own handwriting, rewritten by someone else's pain. He hit record. But this time, he skipped the controversial line altogether. He replaced it with silence. And that silence said more than the line ever could. The automatic doors closed behind him with a dull hiss, muffling the world outside. The air inside the studio was tense, as if the walls themselves were bracing for impact. Jungkook stood facing the glass booth, earbuds still around his neck. not turning around even when Taehyung's footsteps echoed against the soundproof floor. You replaced the line. Taehyung's voice was calm, dangerously quiet. But underneath it was fire. Not the kind that roars, but the kind that burns slowly, deliberately. Jungkook didn't respond. Not at first. He tapped a few buttons on the mixer, saving his latest vocal take into a folder titled Unsent. Answer me, Taehyung pressed, stepping closer. You took out the line that made this album real. Jungkook turned. His expression wasn't angry. It was worse. It was wounded, betrayed, even now. I didn't replace it, he said coldly. I erased it. Taehyung laughed once, a bitter, humorless sound. You think that erases what you felt when you wrote it? No, but it erases the war that comes with it. Jungkook crossed his arms. You really want our names trending for the wrong reasons? Again? Taehyung stepped into his space now, close enough that their shoulders nearly brushed. His voice dropped, but the sharpness cut even deeper. You think I didn't hear that track and know exactly what you were saying? You think I didn't feel it the moment you recorded it? You didn't say anything. Not when it mattered. I wanted to see if you meant it. Meant what? Jungkook's voice rose now, louder than it had been all day. That you sold me out for your own solo moment? That you left when everything was falling apart? That you watched the fandom turn me into the villain and said nothing? Taehyung blinked. Just once. The sting of those words settling in his chest. I stayed silent because I thought we both needed space. No, you stayed silent because it was convenient. The word hung between them like a guillotine. Taehyung's lips parted slightly. Something flickered in his eyes. Regret? Rage? Maybe both. But he didn't reply immediately. He turned his back to Jungkook, staring at the blinking lights on the soundboard instead. You're delaying your album because of me, he said finally. Jungkook exhaled slowly. No, I'm delaying it because I refuse to let that line be the one thing people remember more than the music. Taehyung turned his head. But that line was the truth. Then maybe the truth should have come from your mouth, not mine. A long silence followed. The kind where years of unsaid things pressed down between two people who once trusted each other without question. Then Taehyung did something unexpected. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Worn, like it had been opened and closed many times. He laid it gently on the piano. What's that? Jungkook asked warily. Taehyung didn't answer. He just turned and walked away, only saying, read it when no one's watching. The door closed behind him. Jungkook waited. A full minute passed before he stepped toward the piano, hesitating before picking it up. His hands trembled slightly as he unfolded the paper. It wasn't lyrics. It was a handwritten letter, a letter addressed to him. From Taehyung, a letter dated over a year ago. His breath caught as he read the first line. I wanted to say this before the world got between us, but I was too proud. He sank into the piano bench, the paper shaking in his grip. Outside the studio, Taehyung leaned against the wall, closing his eyes. He had written that letter during the London press tour, the one that changed everything, the one where their last real conversation ended in slammed doors and silence. He never sent it, never had the courage to. Until now. Back in the booth, Jungkook kept reading, word after word. By the time he reached the last line, if you ever sing about me, I hope you remember the part of me that never stopped listening. He couldn't hold it in. He pressed his hand to his face, trying to stop the wave of emotion, but it hit him full force. He hadn't cried in weeks. Not until now. Not until this. But even through the tears, he knew one thing. This album wasn't just delayed because of a line. It was delayed because he wasn't ready to admit how much that line still hurt, and how much the person behind it still mattered. And for the first time in months, he knew the only way forward wasn't erasure. It was confrontation, not in lyrics, not in interviews, but in person. This wasn't about an album anymore. It was about the truth that never made it to the mic. And the voice he still wasn't ready to lose. The knock on Jungkook's apartment door came at 2:17 a.m. He didn't move at first. He just stared at the glowing numbers on the microwave from where he sat on the kitchen floor. Half-finished whiskey bottle beside him and Taehyung's letter folded neatly next to his phone. His breath was unsteady, jaw clenched, chest hollow. The knock came again, firmer this time. He stood slowly, every step to the door dragging like cement. When he opened it, he already knew who it would be. Taehyung stood there, not saying a word, hoodie pulled up, eyes unreadable in the dim hallway light. "You read it?" he asked flatly. Jungkook didn't answer. He stepped aside silently, letting him in. Taehyung walked past him like he had a destination, but ended up standing in the middle of the living room, hands in his pockets. He didn't sit, didn't take off his hoodie. He just stood there, like he was keeping himself ready to leave at any moment. "So," he said finally, eyes still not meeting Jungkook's. "What now? You gonna write another song about how I ruined everything?" Jungkook let out a bitter laugh as he shut the door. "You think this is just about a song? It always starts with a song, doesn't it?" Jungkook stepped forward, past the boundary of safe distance, voice sharp. "You want to talk about what ruined everything? You walked out of that rehearsal, out of that conversation, and you never looked back. Because you wanted me to beg." "No," Jungkook snapped. "Because I thought maybe you'd come back on your own. But instead, I watched you smile in every interview, perform like nothing happened, while I had to pretend I wasn't falling apart behind every live stage." Taehyung's jaw tensed, but he still didn't raise his voice. "I smiled because that's what we were taught to do. I performed because if I didn't, I would have broken down in front of millions. You already broke down. You just made sure I was the only one who saw it." That struck something. Taehyung flinched, just barely, but it was there. Jungkook kept going, anger laced with ache. "And now you think one letter is supposed to erase that silence?" "No," Taehyung replied, finally locking eyes with him. "But I thought it might be the only thing I could give you that wasn't for the cameras." Jungkook stepped even closer now, voice low, trembling. "You didn't say anything when they blamed me for the split. You didn't defend me when the headlines twisted everything. You just went quiet. Because I didn't know how to fight you without breaking us more than we already were. Then maybe you never really wanted to fight for us at all." Taehyung's expression changed. His eyes darkened, something wounded shifting behind them. "That's not fair." "No, it's not." Jungkook's voice cracked. "But nothing about this has ever been fair." Silence. A long, dangereux silence. Then Taehyung stepped forward. Too close now. The air between them, electric, volatile. "You want the truth?" he said, voice barely above a whisper. "You want the part I never said? Fine. I stayed silent because I was scared. Scared that if I opened my mouth, I'd say something I couldn't take back. Scared that if I told you what I really felt, we'd lose everything. Not just us, everything." Jungkook stared at him, lips slightly parted, eyes wide. "And you?" Taehyung continued, bitter now. "You wrote that line to make sure I'd hurt like you did. You didn't write it for healing. You wrote it for war." "I wrote it because I didn't know how else to reach you," Jungkook confessed, voice breaking completely. "I screamed in lyrics because I couldn't scream in your face. Then scream now." That was the first time Jungkook felt the heat rise fully from his chest to his throat. He did scream, but not in anger. He screamed in pain. "I needed you, Hyung. And you disappeared." Taehyung stepped back, as if punched. "I needed one damn message. One phone call. 1 second where I wasn't carrying the collapse of everything we built alone. I didn't think you wanted me back. I didn't know if I did either," Jungkook said, voice quieter now. "But I didn't want to be left behind." They stared at each other, raw and exposed. Nothing left but the fragments of everything unspoken. Taehyung sat down, finally, sinking into the couch like he couldn't hold the weight anymore. "I was going to quit," he said suddenly. Jungkook froze. "I told the company I was done. Before London. I was going to walk away quietly. Let you take the spotlight. Let you shine without me as a shadow." "Why didn't you?" "Because I saw your rehearsal. You looked like you were holding it together with tape and adrenaline. And I knew, if I left then, it would break something I couldn't fix. So you stayed, but not for me." "I stayed because of you," Taehyung whispered. "But I didn't know how to say that without sounding like a coward." "You are a coward." Taehyung nodded, almost ashamed. "Yeah." Jungkook sat down across from him. There were no more tears, just exhaustion, and something else, an ache too deep for words. "I'm rewriting the track," he said. "I'm not removing the line, but I'm not keeping it the way it was either." Taehyung looked up. "I want to tell the truth," Jungkook continued. "The whole truth, not just the pain, the silence, the fear, everything." Taehyung's voice was hoarse. "Even the part where I left you bleeding?" "Especially that part," Jungkook replied. They didn't say anything after that. Just sat there. The night stretched between them like an unfinished song. But somewhere in that silence was a beginning again. You leaked the demo, didn't you? The question was a bullet. Taehyung froze midway through, tying his shoelaces in the practice room. The sunlight pouring through the blinds, slicing across his profile like the divide that now defined them. Jungkook's voice, behind him, was quiet but lethal. A still blade, not yet swung. "I didn't," Taehyung said slowly, deliberately, like walking through a field of landmines. "Why would I?" Jungkook stood in the doorway, arms crossed, phone still in hand. The screen showed a fan account's viral thread, a 30-second snippet of the raw demo version of Dead End Nights, including the original controversial line unedited, unfiltered, unmistakably referencing Taehyung. "Because someone had to want it out," Jungkook replied, voice strained. "And it wasn't me. It wasn't the label. It wasn't my team. The only people who had access to that file were me, the producer who's in Japan, and you." Taehyung stood slowly, each motion rehearsed, deliberate, but his hands curled into fists at his sides. "I haven't even opened that file since I heard it the first time." "Then how did it get out?" Jungkook stepped forward, anger bubbling under his skin now. "You think this is just about music leaks? This has blood on it. People are calling me a narcissist, a manipulator. They're saying I'm trying to humiliate you publicly because of you, because you didn't shut it down. Again." "I didn't leak anything," Taehyung snapped, stepping forward until they were face to face. "But maybe you should have thought twice before recording something that cuts that deep." "I wrote that line when I couldn't even breathe, Taehyung. When the only way I could process anything was to put it in music. It was never supposed to make it to the final cut." "But it did." Jungkook's eyes narrowed. "You wanted people to hear it, didn't you?" "No." "Then why didn't you warn me?" "Because I didn't think you'd let it go. I thought if it stayed buried in a demo, it would die there." "You thought wrong." The tension in the room snapped like a stretched cord. Taehyung backed away, pacing now, his voice louder, more volatile. "You think I want to be the villain in your story? You think I'm enjoying watching you drown in speculation while every interview I do becomes a landmine?" "That's exactly what I think," Jungkook growled. "Because every time I try to fix this, you pull away, you disappear. You say one thing, then vanish into another cryptic silence." Taehyung turned on him. "Because every time I try to talk, you turn it into a fight." "Because it is a fight, Taehyung." Their voices clashed like thunder. Jungkook threw his water bottle across the room, the plastic cracking against the mirror. His chest heaved as he stared at his own reflection, eyes wide, raw, desperate. "You left me in a war and then blamed me for starting it. I didn't ask you to write about me." "You didn't have to," Jungkook whispered, teeth gritted. "You made me." Taehyung's breath caught. There it was, the real wound, the unspeakable truth neither of them had been able to admit, not even in the studio, not even in the silence after that letter. "I trusted you with things I've never said to anyone else," Jungkook said, voice breaking. "And you turned them into distance, into walls, into this par nightmare we're both trapped in." Taehyung walked slowly to the stereo, pressed play. The instrumental version of Dead End Nights filled the room, no vocals, just the haunting synths and slow, heavy beats. He stared at Jungkook, eyes glistening, jaw clenched. "I never wanted this to go public," he said, almost choking on the words. "That demo, that line, it was your heartbreak, but it was our story. And it hurts to know that the only way you felt safe saying it was through a mic." Jungkook lowered his gaze. "I didn't have the words," he admitted. "You didn't try," Taehyung replied. The room trembled with that sentence. Jungkook stepped forward. "I wanted to try. I just didn't think I had the right anymore." "You had every right. You still do. But instead, you handed our silence to strangers. And now they're dissecting a wound they don't understand." Taehyung's voice cracked on the last word. The song faded. The silence that followed was not like before. It wasn't cold. It wasn't distant. It was shared. Jungkook looked up slowly, eyes bloodshot but steady. "Then help me," he said. Taehyung blinked. "With what?" Jungkook swallowed hard. "Rewrite it with me. The track. Together." Taehyung stared at him like he couldn't believe what he'd just heard. "You want me to co-write your album?" "No. I want us to tell our version. Not mine, not yours. Ours. Because I'm done letting this become a war neither of us wanted to start. Taehyung hesitated, but then he nodded. Once. I'll do it. But only if you promise me one thing. What? No more lyrics you're not willing to say to my face. Jungkook smiled faintly. A sad, tired smile. Deal. And in that moment, amid the ashes of all the hurt and all the silence, something began again, not as it was, but as it could be. Together, the recording booth was suffocating, not because of the heat or the soundproof walls, but because of who was standing on the other side of the glass. Taehyung. Headphones on, mic in front of him, script in hand, but no script could prepare him for this. Jungkook sat in the engineer's chair, arms folded, watching. His fingers tapped against the armrest. Fast, erratic, like he was trying to keep his own heart from spiraling out of control. This wasn't just a co-write. This wasn't just a duet. This was an autopsy of their past. And they were both the surgeon and the body. You sure about the line change? Taehyung asked through the mic. Jungkook leaned in toward the console, pressing the talkback button. Yeah, that's the one we agreed on. Taehyung read the new lyrics under his breath. You disappeared between verses divided by, but I kept the chorus alive. He exhaled, then looked up. Their eyes met through the glass. You want raw? Taehyung asked. You want the truth? I want everything we didn't say. The track started rolling. Taehyung closed his eyes. He began to sing. And with each word, each breath, it was as if the walls around them cracked open, spilling out old pain, the kind buried beneath award speeches, choreo rehearsals, and PR smiles. His voice carried regret and love, betrayal and longing, everything woven together into something ugly and beautiful at once. Jungkook listened, still, but not calm, because the second verse was coming. The one he wrote. The one Taehyung had agreed to keep untouched. And when Jungkook's voice was layered back in, it wasn't just a vocal take. It was a confrontation. You told me I'd understand one day divided by, but the silence taught me nothing. Taehyung's eyes flew open. He stepped back from the mic. You said we agreed on edits. That line stays, Jungkook said through the console. You're rewriting history, Taehyung replied, voice tight. I never promised you answers. I needed time. And I gave you a year, Taehyung. The studio door opened with a slam. Taehyung stepped into the control room, yanking off his headphones, throwing them onto the table. You want honesty? Here it is. His tone was ice. I wasn't ready to tell you the truth because I was afraid it would kill what little we had left. You say I vanished, but I watched you change first. You stopped trusting me long before I stopped calling. I changed because I was exhausted, Jungkook shouted. Because every time I opened up to you, you answered with silence or sarcasm. Because you wanted me to bleed like you did. Jungkook stood, his chair rolling backward. I didn't want you to bleed. I just didn't want to bleed alone. That quieted everything. Taehyung looked away. You think I didn't cry? He said, voice breaking. You think I didn't spend nights listening to your old voice notes? Wondering how the hell we got here? Jungkook stared at him, stunned. You kept the voice notes? Taehyung nodded. Every single one. Even the ones you deleted from your side. Jungkook sat back down slowly, breath shaky. This is so messed up. Taehyung gave a weak, bitter laugh. Yeah, but maybe that's why it finally sounds real. They sat in silence, the only sound being the hum of the studio monitors, and their breathing tired, uneven, emotional. After a while, Jungkook spoke. I don't hate you, he said. I wanted to. I really tried. But I couldn't. I know, Taehyung replied quietly. I never hated you either. But I hated how easy it was for the world to turn us into strangers. There was a pause. Then Jungkook asked, Do you remember the last track we recorded together before the break? Taehyung nodded slowly. Of course. You remember what you said when the take ended? I said, let's never let a lyric hurt more than we do. Jungkook's voice cracked. And then you disappeared the next day. I didn't disappear, Taehyung whispered. I broke. And I didn't know how to tell you that without making you think I was weak. I was weak, Jungkook said, laughing bitterly. I just didn't admit it until the damage was already done. They sat for what felt like a lifetime. Then, Jungkook opened a new project file, a blank slate. He titled it, For Us. You ready? He asked. Taehyung nodded. Not even close. But let's do it anyway. This time, there were no engineers, no managers, no deadlines, no leaks. Just them, two voices, one room, one shot to fix what the world thought was unfixable. They hit record, and when the first harmony rang out, it wasn't perfect. It was raw, vulnerable, human, but for the first time, in a long time, it was theirs. I heard the new version, the words sliced through the private dressing room like a scalpel. Jungkook turned sharply, caught off guard by the voice behind him. His eyes met Namjoon's calm, unreadable, but with something simmering just beneath the surface. Namjoon stepped in, closing the door softly behind him. You weren't supposed to, Jungkook said, wary. And yet I did. The silence stretched long between them, until Jungkook exhaled and sat down on the leather couch, exhausted before the interview had even started. His hands were shaking slightly. He gripped the bottle of water on the table, but didn't drink it. Namjoon walked closer, eyes never leaving him. That track isn't just a song, it's an exposé. Jungkook's gaze dropped. It's our truth. Namjoon leaned against the wall, arms crossed. No, it's your truth, and Taehyung's. But the moment it goes live, it becomes the world's narrative, and the world loves to twist the truth until it's a weapon. Jungkook looked up, something flickering behind his eyes. Then maybe they deserve the weapon. Namjoon stared at him for a beat longer, then said quietly, What are you really trying to do, Jungkook? Heal or hurt? Jungkook didn't respond. Namjoon pushed off the wall. They're already spinning it. I saw one headline this morning. Jungkook calls out Taehyung in explosive new lyric. That's not even what the line says, but it's what they wanted to say. Jungkook stood now, defensive. So what? I should silence myself again? Cut everything raw and real just because the internet might get the wrong idea? I'm saying think, Namjoon replied firm. Not as an artist, as a person. As someone who still has to face Taehyung backstage after this interview goes live. Jungkook's jaw clenched. He approved the new version. Every line. Approval isn't the same as forgiveness. Just then, there was a knock. A staff member peered in. You're on in 5, Jungkook. He nodded. The door closed again. Namjoon's voice lowered. I'm not telling you not to speak your truth. I'm asking you to know what you're really trying to say with it. Jungkook sat again, his shoulders collapsing inward. I'm tired of pretending like none of it hurt. I know. And I'm tired of looking at him and feeling like we're two sides of a war we didn't ask for. Namjoon's voice softened. Then say that. The silence after that was gentle. Not heavy, just real. Jungkook stood again, steadier this time. Thanks, Hyung. Namjoon nodded once. Go be honest, but be careful. The truth cuts both ways. And with that, he was gone. The lights on the interview stage were blinding. The cameras rolled. The journalist smiled, too polite, too rehearsed. So, Jungkook, she began, there's been a lot of speculation about the delays surrounding your album. But now that the release date is back on schedule, and the tracklist updated, fans are buzzing about one song in particular, For Us. Jungkook's expression stayed neutral, but his heart pounded. The journalist smiled wider. What made you decide to collaborate with Taehyung on that track after, well, everything? It took a deep breath. Don't rehearse, don't dodge, just speak. Because everything we didn't say was poisoning everything we could say, he said. And I didn't want to carry that silence anymore. The room was quiet. Even the crew leaned in slightly. Jungkook continued, voice steadier now. We both made mistakes. We both stayed quiet when we should have shouted. And then we shouted through our music instead of at each other. That track, it's not a diss. It's a confession. But there's one line in particular, the journalist pressed, that has fans dissecting meanings. The one that says, you filmed the fall but not the rescue. Can you tell us what that really means? Jungkook hesitated. Then he smiled. It means sometimes the public only sees the collapse, not the quiet hands trying to lift each other behind the scenes. And sometimes that includes each other. He glanced off camera, just for a second, just to the side. Taehyung stood in the wings, watching, unmoving, but not hiding. After the interview, Jungkook walked off stage, head down, pulse racing. He didn't expect Taehyung to speak, but he did. That was the first time you didn't try to rewrite what happened. Jungkook looked up. I meant it. Taehyung nodded once. Good. Jungkook opened his mouth to say something more, an apology, maybe, but Taehyung cut him off. You should know something, he said, voice quiet. I did leak the demo. The words hit like a slap. Jungkook froze. Taehyung's eyes never wavered. I didn't mean to. I sent it to someone I trusted. They didn't keep it. You lied to me. I was scared you'd cancel everything, that you'd scrap the track, and I needed people to hear the part of you they never saw before. Do you realize what that did to me? Jungkook's voice cracked. The press. The fans. The threats. I know. Why are you telling me now? Because you forgave me without knowing. Jungkook turned away, his back rising and falling with 1,000 unsaid words. Taehyung waited. Then Jungkook finally whispered, I hate that I understand. Taehyung smiled faintly. So do I. Jungkook looked at him again. Don't do it again. I won't. They stood there, two men bruised by silence, healed slightly by sound. The studio door opened again. A producer called out, We're ready for the final mix playback. You both coming? Jungkook glanced at Taehyung. Taehyung gave a half nod. You lead. And this time, Jungkook didn't walk ahead. He waited. Taehyung caught up, side by side, into the next room, into the next version of truth. The final playback room was dark, save for the soft blue glow from the console and the projection screen displaying the audio waveforms. The beat of For Us pulsed gently through the room like a heartbeat, each second dragging Jungkook deeper into memories he thought he had already outlived. He sat in the center, elbows on his knees, staring straight ahead. Taehyung was 2 seats away, arms folded, eyes closed, as if listening meant closing off everything else. But Jungkook knew better. Taehyung didn't close his eyes to focus. He closed them to avoid being seen. The track reached the bridge, the moment where Jungkook's voice trembled. The vocal wasn't perfect, it cracked at the word left, but they had kept it. It was the only moment Taehyung insisted remain untouched, because that was the real line. When the song ended, the room went still. No applause. No executive comments. Just breathing. And the ghost of everything unsaid that still lived in the silence. I don't know if I like it, Jungkook said suddenly, voice low. You're not supposed to, Taehyung replied without opening his eyes. Jungkook turned to him. Then why release it? Because it's not about liking it. It's about owning it. Jungkook stared at him. You sound like Namjoon. He said the same thing to me last night. Jungkook blinked. He talked to you? Taehyung finally opened his eyes. He always talks. We just don't always listen. Jungkook sat back in his chair. So what now? We put it out and let the world dissect it line by line again? Taehyung shrugged. They were going to do that anyway. At least now they'll be closer to the truth. A soft knock interrupted them. The door opened slightly. The head of PR peeked in. You two have an offer. Big one. They both looked up. She stepped inside. Jimmy Fallon. Joint interview. Tomorrow. Jungkook's stomach dropped. Live? Unfiltered, she said, nodding. They're pitching it as a reconciliation special. International audience. First time you two speak publicly since, well, everything. Taehyung looked away. Jungkook didn't answer. The PR rep continued cautiously. They'll prep you with soft questions. Nothing about the London fallout. Nothing about the leak. Just about the collaboration and the album. That's a lie, Jungkook said immediately. You know it is. She hesitated, then nodded. It is. But it's also your chance to take control of the story. Jungkook looked at Taehyung. Do you want to do this? Taehyung didn't blink. Do you? They stared at each other for a moment too long, like chess players both waiting for the other to blink first. Finally, Jungkook nodded once. Fine. But I'm not doing rehearsed answers. No PR scripts, Taehyung added. And we sit next to each other, not across. The PR woman smiled faintly. Noted. When she left, the tension remained. Jungkook stood, pacing now. This could go sideways fast. Taehyung stayed seated. Then let it. Jungkook turned to him. You're not worried? I'm always worried, Taehyung said. But we've lived in other people's versions of us for too long. Jungkook crossed his arms. What if they ask about the line you leaked? Taehyung met his gaze. Then I'll tell them I leaked it. You'd really admit that? Yes. And destroy your name for it? I already destroyed enough of it when I disappeared. Taehyung said calmly. Might as well finish the job. That's not funny. It's not a joke. The next morning came fast. The dressing rooms backstage at 30 Rockefeller Plaza were colder than either of them expected. The staff was friendly, overly so, asking if they needed tea, snacks, blankets, anything to calm the tension everyone could feel, but no one dared name. Taehyung was already in his suit, tie slightly loose. Sitting by the window, watching the traffic blur past, Jungkook stood behind the divider, shirt still unbuttoned, staring at his reflection in the tall mirror. You always used to fix my tie before performances, Taehyung said suddenly. Jungkook didn't respond at first. Then, quietly, you always used to let me. Silence. Jungkook stepped out, finally buttoned, tie in hand. Without a word, he walked over and tied Taehyung's knot, fingers slightly shaking but certain. Their eyes met. Taehyung spoke softly. We were never just a performance, right? Jungkook nodded, eyes burning. No, we were never just that. A stagehand knocked. You're on in 2. The lights were blinding. The audience clapped loud. Jungkook and Taehyung stepped onto the stage, side by side, smiles tight but genuine. Jimmy welcomed them with open arms, warm banter, applause roaring. And then, 10 minutes in, like clockwork, the real question came. So, there was a line in the demo version that got leaked, caused a lot of waves. It's not in the final cut. But people want to know, was it about you two? Taehyung leaned forward first. I leaked the demo, he said clearly. Jungkook's eyes widened slightly. The room stilled. Taehyung continued. I did it without telling Jungkook. I did it because I was afraid the truth would get buried again. It wasn't the right way, and I regret it. Jimmy was visibly stunned. Wow. Okay, that's honest. Jungkook turned to him. And I forgave him, even before I knew. Why? Because I knew what it felt like to speak through music when you couldn't speak with words, Jungkook said. We heard each other. We also healed through each other. For us is about that, Taehyung added. It's not just our song. It's a mirror. For everyone who ever lost someone and didn't know how to ask for them back. The crowd was silent. Then it erupted into applause, not because of what was said, but because it had finally been said. That night, the interview trended globally. But not for controversy. For the first time in over a year, the top headline read, Jungkook and Taehyung choose healing over headlines. And somewhere, in the quiet between scrolling feeds and fan theories, a generation that had watched them fall, finally watched them rise. Together, the applause still echoed in Jungkook's ears, long after the lights went down and the show wrapped. The ride back to the hotel was silent. Not the peaceful kind, the heavy, tight-chested kind of silence. The kind where too many words sit on the tip of the tongue, but neither person wants to go first. Taehyung sat beside him in the black SUV, eyes on the city lights outside. He hadn't said a word since they left the studio. Jungkook had noticed how he smiled through the post-show photos, how he thanked the staff, nodded politely to Jimmy's jokes, but the second they were out of camera range, he changed. That switch again. That practiced disconnect. Back in the hotel suite, the door clicked shut behind them. They were alone. No management, no staff, no fans, no media. Just 2 men and everything they hadn't said. Jungkook dropped his jacket on the arm of the couch and turned. What is it? Taehyung didn't answer. You've been quiet ever since we walked off stage. Still no reply. I'm not gonna play this game again, Hyung. Taehyung finally spoke, voice low. You still don't get what you took from me. The sentence landed like thunder. Jungkook blinked, stunned. What are you talking about? Taehyung turned to him now, eyes blazing, not sad, not bitter, furious. You wrote about pain that wasn't just yours. You immortalized it in a track. You wrapped your version in melody and gave it to the world, but you never asked if I was okay with being a ghost in your grief. Jungkook stepped back, anger rising. I was grieving. I didn't know how to process what happened to us. I didn't even know if you cared. I cared, Taehyung shouted, stepping forward. I cared so much I didn't know how to breathe without breaking something. You vanished. I broke. The room vibrated with the sound of their voices colliding. No music, no harmony, just raw, shaking anger. Taehyung's chest heaved as he tried to steady his breath. You said everything through that song, but you never said anything to me. You let millions of people think I was the villain before you ever gave me a chance to explain. I didn't ask them to blame you, but you didn't stop them either, Taehyung hissed. You watched me drown and said it was art. Jungkook opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Because the truth was, he did let it happen. He let the fandom fill in the blanks. He let the headlines twist the pain into drama, and he stayed silent, thinking that was the safe thing to do. But safety had a price, and Taehyung had paid most of it. I was hurt, Jungkook said finally, and I didn't know if I'd ever be able to trust you again. Taehyung's voice cracked. And now? Jungkook looked away. I'm trying. You want forgiveness? No. I want understanding. I want you to see that I wasn't trying to destroy you. I was trying to survive. Taehyung walked toward the balcony, pushed the sliding door open. The cold air rushed in. He stepped outside, and Jungkook followed without hesitation. They stood overlooking Manhattan. Bright. Loud. Alive. Taehyung lit a cigarette with a trembling hand, something he hadn't done in years. Jungkook didn't say anything. You remember Tokyo? Taehyung said after a long pause, smoke trailing from his lips. Jungkook nodded. That night at the rooftop. Yeah. You told me if you ever started losing yourself in the music, I was the only one allowed to pull you out. I remember. Taehyung turned to face him. So why didn't you let me? Jungkook's voice broke. Because I thought I lost you already. They stood there, wind tugging at their clothes, the city roaring beneath them. Taehyung took one last drag and put the cigarette out on the ashtray. I didn't want us to end in silence, he said. But I never thought we'd end in a song either. We haven't ended, Jungkook whispered. Have we? Taehyung didn't answer. He looked at him, really looked at him. And for the first time in months, the wall between them didn't feel impenetrable. It felt cracked. And maybe cracks were enough. Back inside, Jungkook sat down at the hotel piano. He ran his fingers across the keys without pressing them. Taehyung stood behind him, watching. You writing something? He asked. Jungkook nodded. I don't know what it is yet. Is it about me again? Jungkook looked up. It's about us. Taehyung pulled a chair closer and sat beside him. Then let's write it together. But this time, he said softly, we don't leave anything out. Jungkook, not that. Ice misting. No more metaphors, he said. No more half-truths, Taehyung agreed. They began to play. Not perfectly, not cleanly, but together. And for the first time in a long time, the music didn't sound like pain. It sounded like healing. The rehearsal studio was dimly lit, empty except for two bodies and a piano in the center of the room. It was supposed to be their final sound check before the, for us, surprise stage premiere, a moment fans had been begging for since the interview aired, and the track went viral again for reasons neither of them could control. But they hadn't played a single note. Jungkook sat at the piano, his fingers resting on the keys but unmoving. Taehyung paced slowly behind him, each step echoing like a countdown neither of them had set. The tension wasn't like before. It wasn't born from anger. It was something colder, more careful. More dangereux. Say it, Jungkook said finally, eyes locked on the keys. Taehyung didn't stop pacing. Say what? You've been holding something back. Again. Say it. Taehyung stopped walking. Silence. Toe long. Toe heavy. Then, you're leaving after the release, aren't you? Jungkook didn't answer immediately. He pressed one key, then another, then stopped. You weren't supposed to know yet, he said. Taehyung's voice was a blade this time. So it's true. Jungkook turned, finally facing him. I wasn't going to vanish. I was going to talk to you. After the stage. After you disappear again? It's not disappearing. It's retreating. Bullshit, Taehyung snapped. Retreating from what? From me? From the fallout? From the fact that this whole collaboration was never about closure. It was your exit strategy. That's not fair. No, Taehyung said, stepping closer, voice rising. What's not fair is that I stood next to you again. Opened up again, exposed everything again only to find out you were already planning to walk away. Jungkook stood now too, Because I need space, Taehyung. Because even after all of this, I still can't breathe when I'm around the weight of what we used to be. Taehyung's voice cracked. Then why write for us? Why drag me through that if you were planning to leave? Because I needed to know if we could do it. If we could be in the same room, look each other in the eye and not fall apart again. And? Jungkook didn't answer. He didn't have to. Taehyung's jaw clenched. So this was never about the music. No, Jungkook said softly. It was about the wound. Taehyung blinked slowly, as if the air had left the room. You used the stage as a confession booth, he whispered. You didn't want healing. You wanted absolution. Jungkook's voice dropped to a near whisper. I wanted to let go. Taehyung took a step back. You know what's funny? He said. I was starting to believe we could rebuild something. Not what we had, but something real, something honest. We did, Jungkook insisted. But sometimes the most honest thing is knowing when to stop forcing something broken to look like it's whole again. Taehyung scoffed. You always were better at walking away. That's not fair, but it's true. The room turned to ice. Jungkook sat back down, shaking slightly. Taehyung turned to leave, but Jungkook's voice stopped him. I didn't leave to hurt you. Taehyung didn't turn around. But you're still leaving. Silence. You once said we were never just a performance, Jungkook murmured. But maybe we were. Maybe that was the only place we ever truly worked. Two people playing roles too big for real life. Taehyung exhaled shakily. I don't know what hurts more. The lies we told the world, or the truths we never told each other. He stepped into the hallway, paused, then said, without looking back, the stage is yours. Finish what you started. And he was gone. Jungkook sat there, alone. He played the first chords of the song, slowly, hesitantly. His voice cracked on the second line. Not because of the lyrics, because Taehyung was right. He had written for us to say goodbye without ever having to say it out loud. And now? Now there was no one left to hear it. The arena was already vibrating with sound. Thousands of fans screaming, lights pulsing like a living heartbeat. Ocean blue army bombs flickering across the dark like a sky full of unspoken prayers. Every screen, every hallway, every technician was ready. This was supposed to be the closing act of Jungkook's solo release event, an intimate cinematic performance of, for us, stripped down, raw, and live. And it was supposed to be the first time he and Taehyung stood on stage together in over a year. Backstage, Jungkook stood in full black, mic in hand, earpiece fitted, the collar of his shirt open just enough to expose the words tattooed along his clavicle, the ones Taehyung once told him not to get because they'd always change their meaning later. And tonight, they had. A stage manager whispered, 2 minutes. Jungkook nodded, but his eyes weren't on the stage. They were on the empty dressing room across the hall. Taehyung's nameplate still hung on the door. No one had removed it, because no one believed he wasn't coming. No confirmation, no statement, no replacement, just silence. Jimin appeared beside him suddenly, placing a hand on his shoulder. He's not here, he said gently. You're going to have to go out alone. Jungkook's jaw tightened. He's supposed to be here. I know, Jimin said quietly. But maybe this song was always meant to be sung alone. Jungkook looked down at the floor, heart pounding like thunder in his chest. I don't want to do it without him. You already did, Jimin replied. You wrote it without him. You lived it without him. This is just the echo, the stage manager signaled again. 30 seconds. Jungkook turned his head toward the light, the applause swelling, the chant of his name echoing through the dark. He took one step forward, and then he stopped. The mic in his hand suddenly felt heavier than it ever had before. He turned, shoving it into Jimin's hand. I can't, he said. Jimin blinked. Jungkook, you have to... No, not like this. He walked, fast, out of the hallway, past the stage wing, ignoring the calls, the panic, the chaos erupting behind him. He grabbed his phone mid-stride and called Taehyung for the 3rd time that night. Voicemail, again. He kept walking. The backstage entrance opened, and he burst out into the parking area, the cold night air biting his skin. He looked around, like he was expecting a sign, anything. And then he saw him, leaning against a black car under the street lamp, hood up, face down, hands in his pockets. Jungkook froze. Taehyung didn't look up. Not yet. Jungkook walked slowly, cautiously. When he was close enough to speak, he didn't yell. He just asked, "Why didn't you come inside?" Taehyung looked up finally, and Jungkook hated that his eyes already looked apologetic. I was waiting to see if you'd come out, Taehyung said. I wasn't sure you would. I thought we were past this. So did I. A long beat passed. The distant sound of the crowd roaring filtered through the concrete. You knew they'd leave the mic open for you, Jungkook said. I also knew you could sing it alone. Jungkook stepped closer, pain etched in every syllable. Then why write it with me at all? Because I wanted to believe we still shared something, Taehyung said. But the second I heard about your post-release plans, I knew I was wrong. I told you I needed time, Jungkook insisted. That doesn't mean I'm erasing you. No, Taehyung replied, his voice breaking. You're just leaving me in the credits. Jungkook flinched. That's not what this is. Then what is it? Jungkook swallowed hard. It's me trying not to fall apart again. Taehyung's jaw clenched. And you think I won't? You're stronger than me. No, Taehyung said softly. I just hide it better. The wind picked up slightly. Jungkook stepped closer. We can still do this, he said, desperation creeping in now. We don't have to be perfect. We just have to be there. Taehyung looked at him, then whispered, Then sing it without me. Jungkook stared. I'm not punishing you, Taehyung said. I'm saving myself. Jungkook looked down at the concrete. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out his in-ear monitor. Held it out. I never wanted to do this without you. Taehyung stared at it for a long time. Then, silently, he took it. Back inside, the lights dimmed. And when the crowd saw them walk out together handing off the mic like it was a peace offering, the sound that erupted was louder than anything either of them had ever heard. They didn't speak. They didn't announce the song. They didn't explain. They just stood at opposite sides of the piano. And when the first note played, something shifted in the air. Jungkook sang the first line, Taehyung the second. And then they sang together. Not perfectly, not cleanly, but honestly. And when the final note faded, and Jungkook whispered, This was never just about the music, Taehyung nodded. Because for the first time in a long time, the performance wasn't an escape. It was a choice. And they had chosen each other, even if only for this moment. Would you like me to write a special epilogue or post-credit scene?